Good morning, all. My name is Bill Amaralt, and I want to welcome you to Career Clarity and Purpose. In this event, which is both live and recorded, my panel of 14 experts will reveal their strategies to provide career clarity aligned with your true purpose. Was your life and career impacted by COVID? Almost everybody that I've spoken with has. Were you downsized, right-sized, reorged, let go, rift, whatever the circumstance might have been? Well, I've experienced those, and as have many of my guests, and sometimes more than once. Or maybe you're part of the Great Resignation, or you realized and consciously decided that something else might be better for you. Well, my guest this morning is Ed Samuel, is a career, life, and executive coach, public speaker, author, and a certified career assessment and DISC team leader, and has a nonprofit stewardship ministry and founder of Sam Nova Inc. And that's his website is www.samnovainc.com. He and his team provide career assessments, resume writing, career transition support, etc. And especially for those who are 55 and over looking to make career pivot, which we're going to be talking about in some detail here shortly. So I could go through the rest of this about how you've coached over 850 clients and written over 1,000 resumes and all of the testimonials that are on LinkedIn, but I'd rather just introduce you and get started with the conversation. How are you this morning, Ed?
Great. Good to be with you, Bill. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, you're quite welcome, and thanks for agreeing to be part of this. So, I've looked through your background, and we spoke about it offline, and to the point of creating career clarity, how did the different career positions that you've had through the years line up with what you're doing now? How did it turn into you being the career and life and executive coach that you've become at this point?
Well, it's a so I started out my career in finance, and I actually got married really early. And my father-in-law worked for a company, and he said, "Hey, I think this might be good for you." So there wasn't a lot of thought put into it, and off I went to become an accounting clerk 3 for what was soon to be the second largest computer company in the world, second to IBM. Almost 20 years later. And so I started a career in finance and it was interesting. So there was no well thought process there. And I started to grow in that role. Next thing I know, I was not only a finance person, but the operations leaders wanted me to play an operational role. And so operations became part of my career. And then the third part, HR came into my world as part of my career. So I wish I could tell you I had this well thought out plan, but I didn't, Bill. Every company I went to, the first 4 big companies I went to, I had people there that knew me and pulled me away to another role that was greater responsibility. It was interesting. Yeah, okay. So it was interesting. And then at one point, when I turned about, I think, 46 years old, I was laid off by corporate America. I wish I could tell you I had this really grand plan laid out in terms of what I was positioning myself to do. I just had a family. I worked hard. I made a lot of money. I thought that was what I was supposed to do. But from a career standpoint, I was never a finance person necessarily, but I was never really an operations person. I was really never an HR person. So part of my story is when I turned 46, I was laid off. I went fishing for a couple of months and caught like 200 trout. My wife said, "Get back to work." I always remember that. I ate, a lot of trout went to a food bank. I can tell you that.
Okay.
But then what happened was, I started interviewing. I never really interviewed for a role. I went to Barnes and Nobles and I got the book called Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren.
Great book. Yep.
And I remember sitting there and I got the book. I was so excited. I sat down at my desk and I remember opening up the first 2 pages. Oh, this is great. And it asked for my name, my address. That was perfect. And then the next page, what's your purpose?
Yeah.
And I sat there and I stared at that page for 15 minutes. I couldn't answer the question. So I took the book, I shut it, and I put it on the shelf. Never finished the book. And I said to myself, I don't got, it's not, I'm not sure what is my role at this point?
Mhm.
I like a lot of things, but can I say I was hitting my purpose? What ended up happening was I ended up taking a job in Arizona for another multi-billion-dollar company. And in Arizona, I met somebody playing racquetball in a gym out in the desert. Didn't know his name. He then ended up introducing me to a nonprofit ministry that he was part of. That particular ministry happened to have an assessment tool. And I took the time to fill out that assessment tool for the very first time,
Mhm.
550 questions, and it allowed me to sit down and recalibrate what my real purpose was. And what came out the other end of that, Bill, was me not going back to corporate America. Me
Mhm.
taking all these different positions, and I've held 38 different paid positions in my career.
Mhm.
38. If you went to my website, there's a little, you could click on it, and you could see all the 38 things I've done. But what came out the other side was, Ed, you need to hang your own shingle. And what became clear to me was that all these different experiences, all these different roles, all the leadership things that you've done, all the people that you hired, fired, all this said, you know what? You might be a really good career coach.
Interesting.
You might be. And that's how it came about, Bill.
Well, as you're
And,
saying this,
you know, no, 14 years later, no looking back.
and the world is a better place for it, by the way. And you know, in the first 4 words of Rick Warren's book, which is divided into 40 chapters, if I remember right, you're supposed to read them, 40 days in a row, blah, blah, blah. But the first 4 words are, it's not about you. And ultimately, that becomes the conduit for your purpose. Is what is it that you can bring to the rest of the world that other people can't? What have you been put here for that is going to be of most value to others who may experience you, both either organizations, companies, or individuals, depending on what the ministry is. And it's funny that you say 38 positions. I haven't counted mine. I don't think it's quite that many, but people look at my background and say, wow, this guy's worked at all these great companies and he's done these different things and all that. And they have all this like, wow, type of reaction. Other people look at it and say, this guy's had more jobs than a stand-up comic. And ironically, they're both right. It's just a matter of what their perspective is and what they're looking for. And ultimately, what it comes down to is, can I, or can you, or can anybody who's on this call resolve the issues of the person on the other side of the desk or the other side of the Zoom call that they may have? And that's what it really comes down to. So 14 years ago, you hung a shingle out as a career coach and utilized all of your operations, your finance, your manufacturing. I mean, I saw the companies that you've worked for, particularly the first one that you didn't name, but clearly you had so many roles within that company that you had direct experience with those areas of expertise that you could then communicate about. Not only communicate about with the person that you're dealing with, but help that person communicate about their value proposition as well. And it just kind of speak to that. I mean, you've worked on over 1,000 resumes, so.
Sure. So what happens is that, different career coaches bring certain things to the table, and resume writers as well.
Mhm.
I've been blessed by this in that, when somebody sits down with me and they're, a vice president of finance and says, well, you wouldn't understand it. Well, I've been a CFO and I've been a VP and I would understand. Hey, Ed, I'm a VP of operations. You
Yeah.
wouldn't understand. Hey, Ed, I'm an accountant. You wouldn't understand. Hey, Ed, I'm a recruiter. You wouldn't understand. I'm a general manager. You wouldn't understand. What I get to do is I get to drill down and challenge people around quantifying their value
Mhm.
and bringing out the best of them in conversations that they're a lot of times surprised. Say, how would you know these things? So you take a lot of that experience, and you're able to then, leverage it to get, to add even more value as a career coach and as a resume writer. And then even the people on my team who write resumes, they know me well enough to know that, we play off each other, and they're able to do a really good job with my clients as well. So it's not just exclusively just me, but the people around me that I also support our clients.
Well, there's one I have. I have varying backgrounds as well. I graduated college as an engineer, and I did some operations improvement. I did some IT work in grad school and then migrated to marketing, advertising, sales, and in various industries. But what I have found is that when you have direct experience in an area that somebody else does, it allows you to ask the right follow-up questions, or to ask the questions that people may not be considering asking themselves about not only what their value is, but what have they done that has been worthwhile, and providing perspective about the implications for that. So describe, you mentioned your team. Describe how that how you've set that up, and how you work with different folks on your team to serve the client base that you have.
Well, one thing that we do, I have a team of about 25 people on a virtual basis that do career assessments from around the US.
Mhm.
And now that might sound, wow, but it's almost more of a ministry to me than it is it's going to bring in a lot of revenue for me. Quite honestly, for every assessment somebody on my team does, I get $12. So then there's no network marketing going on. So if people say, hey, Ed, you're leading this big team, oh my goodness, you must be millions of dollars right now. No, it's $12 per assessment, because that's what's on my heart, to help people. However, for my own practice, I certainly charge a fee when people are sitting down with me personally.
Sure.
But we never really, when people come to us, and we get 1 to 3 referrals every day from around the country, and we have these conversations, and it all begins with, what do you want to do next? Where do you want to go?
Right.
And if people are not sure, we do assessments. And that's a big part of what we do. If they don't know where they want to go, I'm more than happy to refer them to another career coach.
Right.
Because I'm not going to coach people. We're not going to write resumes when we're not sure where we're going. And if you say you want to go 5 directions, I'll refer you to another career coach.
Right.
Because that becomes problematic. I've helped too many people. If you can get focused, you could take 10 things or bring it down to 2 or 1 and go after that. Success has been 95% greater than if you were to not have thought through that. So that's one part of our process. Once we know where we're going, we write resumes, and I've had up to 4 resume writers now, which is a beautiful thing. But they know me like a glove. I'm also part of the final review. So that's one of the ways. We don't edit resumes. I have strategic partners, maybe some of which are on this call right now, that actually will work with some of my prospects or potential clients to edit resumes.
Right.
99% of our resumes, Bill, 99% of our resumes we could completely revamp. So we're never a good choice to edit a resume. I'll let someone else do that. We create resumes, we revamp them completely, and I could talk about resumes more. But then we talk about building out LinkedIn profiles. That's a big thing of what we do.
Right.
This world that we live in right now, with 685 million LinkedIn accounts in the world, it's no longer resumes enough. It's a 1-2 punch. It's resume, LinkedIn. It's no longer resume is enough. So 90% of our clients do resumes and LinkedIn with us. And then we get into building out strategic networks. We get into interview preparation, targeted job searches, attacking the hidden job market. 40% of our clients have landed jobs, Bill, because of the hidden job market. It takes a tremendous amount more work than applying for jobs, waiting for recruiters, and only going all in by leveraging your network. So, and we'll actually even include negotiating. Most recently, I brought on a LinkedIn coach, which is going to be part of our practice. So, yeah, so that's kind of what we put people through each and every day.
Well, the 2 assessments that I've used, and I delegate this out, they do them online, and then we go through the results. Myers-Briggs and DISC are my 2 favorite. What other assessments do you recommend that have helped people create the clarity that they're looking for? And I know you went through this process, 3 months fishing and met a guy in the desert, and God always puts people in our way or in our pathways when at the right time. But what are your favorite assessments, and how do you go about doing that?
So, I looked at about 25 different tools before I made my decision, and Myers-Briggs and a lot of the tools, from what colors your parachute to the Berkman tool. I mean, you name it. There's a lot of Hogan. There's a lot of tools out there. I decided to go after a tool called Career Direct.
Okay.
It's funded by a nonprofit called Crown. It's been around for 20 years. It's statistically validated, which a lot of tools are not, by the way, especially in the LinkedIn world that are floating around. On my assessment team, I have 4 or 5 PhDs. Every one of them joined my team. First thing they look at, Ed, where's the statistics? Because if it's not statistically validated and sound, be very careful. What this tool is 550 questions. It takes a deep dive in personality, your interest, your skills, and your values. So there are tools out there that do a great job, but they don't want to touch values because values can get really up close and personal. And what comes out of that is an initial 24-page report. We'll spend a couple of hours going through that, dissecting it, and building a case of what makes the most sense, what you're going to, what you should do, what you have to be really careful to do. It's followed by an additional report that's additional 8 pages, an action plan, a set of resources and tools. By the end of next year, this team of 25 plus that I lead, we would have touched 1,000 lives using that tool.
It's great.
In the United States, and we actually have somebody on our team in Zimbabwe who I think is approaching 20, 25 consultations that he's done. So it's been a pretty amazing tool. This tool, by the way, is one of the few tools where it has a global calling success rate that's then brought to the US. Most of our tools, right, are US driven, and we push them out to the world.
Right.
This is the one tool that exists that's used on a secular basis in the world that's been absolutely stunning. And that's one of the reasons I picked it. There's, in fact, there's a country in South America that you can't even graduate high school unless you do one of these very assessments we're talking about.
Oh.
So on a global scale, it's been unbelievable. And that's why I chose that tool called Career Direct. All you have to do is look it up, careerdirect.org. Well, Career Direct, one word, .org. Anybody can find it. And if you're interested in joining, my team, certainly reach out to me. I'm more than happy to continue to build the team, and it's been pretty amazing. The other tool that we use, which is actually founded by the same nonprofit organization, is called Personality ID. ID. 100% of my clients that come through our door use Personality ID as part of our process when we're building a resume. Now, this tool was originally designed for church teams. It was so successful globally that it was then converted into a secular tool used for all teams. And here's the twist. The twist is the cost basis is incredibly low, just like for the first assessment, because anytime something's funded by a nonprofit, the cost basis is less than the for-profit models, right? But in this particular tool called Personality ID, we use it so that we could get a better feel, but it's only 16 questions and statistically validated. And not one time have we used this tool. And we must have done, I must have done 500 of these so far. Did somebody say it was off in any way, shape, or form? So those are the two tools. Those are the two tools that we use. In fact, we have some clients who actually use the tool before an interview or before a job offer is extended. This is a very tool called PID, Personality ID.
And so these are not only predictive, but they're validated by the people who say, listen, this is me. I mean, after they do the 16 questions and see the summary assessment, they say that, yeah, this is me, and which is great. And so if you could, I know that you say if somebody really doesn't know what they want to do, or they have 5, 10 different directions, whatever it is, you'll send them to another coach. But it sounds to me like, based on these assessment tools, that you've worked with people who have made these transitions from one discipline to another, or whatever. Just a couple examples of how that process went. And I love what you said about yourself earlier.
So here's an example, and we've helped I couldn't even tell you, maybe 40% of our clients over the years have done pivots to
Mhm.
something very different. And so here's a case of a client approached me and said, hey, Ed, I need to talk. And here's somebody who's 30 years old, and he's going to medical school. In the very last semester of internship, he made a mistake. And the mistake that he made was unforgivable.
Mhm.
And in the medical world, there's certain things you could do and not do, mistakes you can make. But when you make a certain type of mistake, you will never get licensed in the state of Pennsylvania, at least.
Yep.
So here's a case. He comes to me and he says, hey, Ed, everything told me to be a medical doctor. And guess what? My medical career just ended.
Mhm.
What can I do? So we sat down, we did one of these career direct assessments, and we spent 2 hours going through everything. One of the things I like about our assessment too is that in that 2 hour period, we will look at no less than 95 career areas, minimum.
Okay.
So it's done very well, very integrated. And people walk away with a framework all written out in terms of how to think through things.
Mhm.
Well, we start getting into what does he really like? Well, he loves people, right? And he has this compassionate side to him. That's why he wanted to become a doctor.
Sure.
But then it was like, well, but I can't be a doctor, Ed. So then we said, well, what do you like? What do you like to do? And it was really interesting because through all these likes, guess what his number one like was? It was animals.
Oh, so he becomes a vet.
So now, no.
Yeah.
But we talked about that because you
Right.
know what? Maybe I may not want to stay in that field, but then we said, well, let's talk about how talk about this people thing that you have. But I want to deal with people. I said, okay, well, vets deal with people, yeah, but there's something about law enforcement that I like.
Hmm.
Really? Let's talk more about that. Guess who is now a canine police officer?
Ah, okay.
So there's an example of someone where a mistake is made, and then everything starts anew. But then he becomes a canine police officer because he's going to then go do something that will bring out the best of who he is.
Mhm.
And see, what we're talking about is, and why we do these assessments and why we try to optimize careers, is to try to get somebody to that better place.
Sure.
And that better place takes different forms for different people, and depending on their situation. Here's another example. We work with somebody who I had a school teacher come to me. School teacher, 15 years as a school teacher.
Mhm.
What do you want to, and if I want to do something that's more my calling. Well, the school teacher wants to become an engineer.
Wow. Okay.
So and then what happens is that we have to put a process in place to become that engineer from school teacher. Early on, in this particular example, this person had a mechanical engineering degree and then went right off the rails within a year or two later and went into sales, went into network marketing, became a school teacher. So 25 years later, she comes to me at the age of, let's just make an argument, 52.
Mhm.
What else can I do? And we go through a conversation about, now, what is it going to take to get there? And in her particular case, it was pretty clear her true love was engineering.
Hmm.
And all the work that she had done in between was because her husband moved, she moved, and things were just rolling. But then they stopped at one point and said, you know what? I only have another 10, 12 years of my career left.
Right.
I want to make this pivot, what could bring out the best in me, not just to make money. And we put a plan in place. And her pivot was hard. It took us a year just to do what we needed to do and all the steps to position her to a place where she got her first job. And her first job, by the way, was in an engineering job. It was a second shift production supervisor for a medical device company.
Aha, okay.
Get her foot in the door. That after 2 years, she ended up going to first shift in a quasi-engineering role.
Hmm.
Then the company, because of COVID and what, got laid off 3 years later.
Okay.
Now, as Paul Harvey once say, the rest of the story, she called me up, Ed, this is what happened. Ed, I'm still at it and I'm going to get to that engineering role. Well,
Mhm.
guess what? A month and a half ago, she called me up. I landed a job with one of the leading medical device companies as a full-blown engineer.
Nice.
And I could not be happier. And that this was a 4-year journey to get there, Ed.
Mhm.
But now I'm at the right place with the right people, with the right company, doing the right thing, making 3 times as much money as I was making as a school teacher, but it's bringing out the best in me. A lot of times when we go and we try to make these pivots or we try to do something tough, it's not a quick fix. Sometimes it is. Most of the times, the harder the pivot, you've got to have a plan to get there.
Right.
If if the pivot's a minor pivot, easier to get there, right? Gosh, that's an example. I could, we work, just one more quick one, and not to depress anyone, but I'll get phone calls from people, from moms and dads saying, "Hey, Ed, my son or daughter made a big mistake." What happened? Well, a big mistake. So, well, what was the big mistake? Were they fired? No, they just spent 3 years in federal penitentiary.
Oh, yeah.
They have a college degree. Their life, they believe, is over. And all they can do now, if they got out of prison, is deliver pizzas. And I'm not putting anything down for pizza delivery people, because a lot of people I know deliver pizzas and they make a lot of money. So, but they were born to be more than that. Ed, can you
Right.
help? Well, guess what we do? We go through one of our assessments.
Mhm.
And guess what comes out the other side? Well, here's 2 or 3 choices. Let's do some research. So in this particular example, this person was actually in entertainment for 7, 8 years in Nashville, LA and Nashville.
Ah.
Made the mistake, did time in prison, came out delivering pizzas, and now guess who's one of the top recruiters in the state of Pennsylvania right now?
This person, it sounds like, yeah. Okay.
This person. So there's a lot of work that goes into having people make career shifts.
Well, the common thread that you've identified here is, instead of looking at how the wind is blowing and how your circumstances have directed you towards certain things, and looking at the outside environment and saying, "Oh, okay, I'll get that, I'll do this," or whatever, it's really looking inward and seeing, what is it about you? And I use this mantra all the time with my clients or with prospective clients: is God put us all here for a variety of reasons. Career is one of the most important. So it's up to us to define and manifest those reasons in the best way that we can. And everything that you said in the last, 27 minutes here has gotten to that point: is what is it that that person is put here to do, and how can that value be exhibited to other organizations, other individuals, or whatever the cause might be that they're working for. It's great work. So, and so you mentioned 3 of these outcomes. How would you recommend those who may be listening or who are watching the process? And again, you've already spoken to the assessment tools and the value of a third party, a counselor or one of the folks that are on your team, in terms of asking the right questions. I mean, anything else that goes along with the process that you would recommend?
Yeah, so here's always the challenge, right? When people call up, I had a person call me up yesterday. They had, I'm leaving this field that I'm in, and here's what I'm thinking. And what do you think, Ed? And what happens is, it's kind of like, someone calling me up and asking me a stewardship question. Hey, should I sell my RV, or should I rent it? Should I lease it, or should I keep it? And it's kind of like, I don't know enough information about you to give you any qualified answer.
Right.
And based on your resume, based on what you're telling me, I can tell you where the wind might be drifting, but I could be completely wrong. And then what happens is that, well, do one of our assessments and I could get much better clarity and we could sit down and talk through it. But you know what? There are some people who are not going to pay me $575 to sit down with me for 2 hours to go through this assessment.
Mhm.
Now, they might pay somebody on my team less money to do it,
Right,
but then if you want free, I'm a bad bet.
right,
If you want, you could go to, you don't need to hire me or you, Bill, or anybody to do free. Free is easy, right?
right,
But when you hire somebody to do an assessment, the assessment has to be valid, like we talked about statistically, and then sit down with somebody who's been there, who's going to give you not the, well, what do you want to do? I mean, there's one assessment out there, and I'm not going to name it, that I actually I watched a coach go through it with a client, and I was embarrassed on day 2. I was embarrassed to even be in the room, to be even associated with it. And it was one of these assessments where you spit out, you get some you get some reflection, and then it was like, well, here's a list of 100 careers. Go home and circle the ones that you think are the best fit, and come back and we could talk about it.
right.
Oh, that drove me crazy. You're paying someone to go back and to give your own opinion on what you think you want to do anyway. And we're trained in just the opposite. Hey, if you go down that path, let me tell you what I think is going to happen. Let me tell you what the risks are.
Mm-hmm.
So when we finish the assessment with anybody, we want them just to be eyes wide open. So they're making conscious decisions as what the risks might be if they go down a path that may not make sense or bring out the best of them. And in other cases, it may make perfect sense.
Understood.
I never like to tell anybody, and we don't, you should not do this no matter what. I just say, be careful, look at the framework and make a conscious decision as to what you do or what not to do. So to answer your question, Bill, we always start with the assessment is always a good first start.
Sure.
But if you come in and just ask, what do you think, Ed? I mean, I could give my opinion, based on what I think, but I'm very careful. And if people don't want to spend any money and they want free, they need to go to a different career coach because, we charge a fee for that experience, that personal opinion, not to sit there and say, well, what do you think? And let's just go with whatever you want to go with. The value is when you tell somebody, just like on a resume, well, I taught 10 classes. I want that on my resume. But then you sit there and say, well, that has no value. What do you mean it doesn't have value, Ed? An activity has no value. Who cares whether you taught classes? How many classes did you teach? Well, I don't remember, Ed. Well, it was only 5 years ago. Did you teach one class a month or did you teach one class a day?
Yeah.
I taught 5 classes a day. Oh, so you taught 2,000 classes a year. How many people were in the class? But see, we all started out with the client telling me what to put on the resume.
Right.
Same thing with when you're coaching somebody with what to do in their career. A good coach is going to give their opinion so that they stay out of trouble or put them on the best path. And I'm not doing it to be argumentative. I'm not trying to be not supportive. I'm just saying, if you go down that path, eyes wide open, here are the potential risks. I had one person, Bill, this true story. All my stories are true. I have hundreds of stories. They came to me and said, hey, I heard about you. I'm trying to be a police officer. And it's not working yet. And I heard about you. So let's sit down. What's going on? I've tried 5 times and I failed at the final leg of the process 5 times. I said, well, why? What are you failing? I'm failing at the physical ability to not scale the wall or whatever it is. Well, come to find out, I said, well, what's the problem? He goes, well, I only have one leg because it was blown off in Iraq.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I didn't even know you had one leg when you walked in, or I didn't know anything about this. So guess what we did? We did a career assessment, just like we're talking about. And guess what came out the other side? You should be in sales. You know what? Real estate would be unbelievable. This is a people part. I mean, it would just be, that's your calling. And here's what happened. 2-3 months go by. I get a note from him. Ed, guess what? I said, what? I landed a job at a financial services firm. They're paying me a lot of money, Ed. And oh, this is great. I said, how did you get that job? My buddy called. Oh,
Huh?
you'd be great here. You'd be great here. Pays a lot of money. He's there. 3 months goes by, 7 months, he calls me up. Hey, Ed, I quit. It was horrible. It was not bringing out the best in me. It was bringing out the worst in me.
Wow. Okay.
And Ed, it paid money. I would need something that brings out the best in me. Ed, I'm now the real estate person. And guess who's one of the most successful real estate people in Chester County, Pennsylvania?
This guy sounds like.
So you see what happens? Sometimes even our networks with the best intentions pull us in places that sound good, but it may not be what will bring out the best in you. Sometimes it does, and when it does, it's a beautiful thing. But you know, it's one of the talks that I gave. I think it's the third most talk, and I talk a lot on different places throughout 2022. My third most talk that kind of hit me in, I'm going to say, the May timeframe was, what do you do before you quit or resign in your current role?
Mm-hmm.
And I've given that talk down, I don't know, 10 times this year to different groups. The reason I put that talk together was because in March of this year, the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics came out a report that said up to 25% of the people who resigned as part of the Great Resignation made a huge mistake.
Yeah.
And they wish they had it, and they wish they had it.
Mm-hmm.
That then prompted me to say, wait a minute now, let's go back to the drawing board for everybody out there who's thinking about resigning. Talk to a coach like myself or some of the people on this call. Think this thing through a little bit before you resign, before you even think about leaving, just to talk it through.
Right.
Most of those people that I talk to who call me up and say, Ed, I made a mistake. I say, well, let's talk about, what did you go through? Oh, Ed, a buddy called me up. Oh, Ed, I saw this job posted and it makes more money. Hey, Ed, I'm in a toxic environment and I just wanted to get out and I just landed this next job. I come up with all the reasons you can imagine. But then I said, well, is this job bringing out the best of you? Have you ever really thought through what makes the most sense? And then it's like, no, not really yet. And then we go through an assessment and then we get them back on track.
You know, you mentioned a few minutes ago what you would recommend one of your clients to do or not to do. And I've learned that the only time that I will make a recommendation not to do something is if they say they're going to rob a bank or something similar. But other than that, it's their decision. And it's my role, and you're sharing this, it's our role, let's call it, to ask the right questions so that the right answers come up to the surface and people can then go in the direction that they were really intending to, even if they couldn't see it right away before they started working with you. And you know, you mentioned the point about if somebody wants to work for free. It always amazes me that people would spend more on a weekend vacation than they will on what their livelihood would be going forward. And you know, we're all going to make mistakes at certain points. We may have made decisions, you know, going back even to childhood where they were quote unquote considered mistakes. But as long as you learn from them, and as long as you can apply those to what your future decisions are all about, then it's all worthwhile. Yeah, one other quick thought that I had here before we're getting close to the end on time, but I totally appreciate both your stories and your approach in terms of how you help people with their clarity related to their careers. Have you helped or worked with those who were leaning to or about to or on the doorstep of retirement, and how have you worked with them in those cases?
Yeah, interesting enough, in the last 2.5 years, more than 50% of our clients are 60 and above.
Okay.
Really, it's been really amazing. 100% of them ended up landing jobs and going back to work.
Okay.
Age discrimination and all those things exist, and it's a whole separate talk that I give. It's a very disciplined approach to getting back to work once you hit age of 60.
Right.
Some people think as soon as they turn 51, it's over. 55, 59. but a lot of people want to go back to work. Now, it is interesting that some people who retire, and I'm going to give you a good example. I'm meeting with someone next week. She called me up. This was an executive with a company, virtually one company her whole life. She retired, kind of one of those deals where you could retire a little early, but she's in the retirement age. She retired. And then she said, you know what? I'm on the board of a library. I think I'm going to go in and just be, a volunteer at the library.
Huh.
But, she's 62. And she called up and said, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about it. I heard about you. I'm not sure if my calling, who I am, I know I could be a really great volunteer at the library, but I got this wealth of experience of who I am and what I could bring to the table. I think I got a lot more in my basket here to give and touch a lot of other lives and businesses and a lot of value. What else can I do? By the way, I don't want to do anything related to my past life.
Understood.
All those transferable skills, what else could I do other than be a volunteer at the library? And maybe I even get paid for it. So we're actually sitting down next week and we're going to go through one of our assessments and we're going to spend 2 hours and we're going to then craft what the best direction might be. And the irony is that best direction might be for her to become a volunteer. But I have this inkling she could do a whole lot more.
There's way more that she can offer as an executive to an organization, and they promoted her, how many ever times through the years. One of the, and I mentioned this in one of the earlier calls, but a good friend of mine from college actually gave this little nugget to me last summer, and he said, you retire when you have enough and when you have had enough. And the combination of those two is usually right, because if one of them is missing, you can stay with a position that you love for years if you haven't had enough in terms of working with it. So, any other?
I was going to say, this is another really interesting story. I get calls from people who are retired, 64, 65, and I've retired 2 years. I need to get back to work immediately. My wife and I have never been together for 40 years of work. We're on the verge of divorce.
Yeah.
And there's no kidding about this.
That's right.
Bad. Ed, what can I do? The net of that particular story is that guess who's also a real estate doing incredibly well at the age of 69.
That's great. You mentioned this, that several of my peers, colleagues, guys I went to school with or I worked with at one point or another in my career are either near retirement or at it and have retired officially this year. And we've had celebrations. There's some guys I play golf with in Myrtle Beach every October. And it's been great to see that. But there's also and one of the prior speakers mentioned this, is what's your plan in retirement? What are you going to do? And I had this conversation with my wife, who's been retired for 6 years from an education role. It's what do you want to do, become, accomplish, or experience now that you have the time to do it? And those are always the questions that I run with, at least to start with. But it sounds like that between the assessment and some version of those questions that are a little more qualitative, we get to the right point. So anything else as we wrap up here that you'd like to say, any comments related to it? And obviously your contact information will be on the recorded call, and we will put that out there for everybody to reach out to you as appropriate. And as far as my concern is that, I'm offering all of the links to these interviews today. And Ed, you're the fourth one, and there are now 10 more to go, along with a copy of my ebook called Finding God's True Purpose for Your Career. It's the shortened version of the full book. And also a free 20 to 30 minute consultation with me about what's next in their career direction. So is there anything that you'd like to put out there, or just obviously we have your contact info, which will be publicized as well?
No, certainly, go to our website. We offer a free initial consultation for every client. We almost never take a client on unless we talk to them live. That's something that we do. I'm a published author of a book called Optimize Your Resume, Do's and Don'ts. And if you're on this call listening today, if you order the book through my website, you could also order it via Amazon. again, optimize your resume do's and don'ts the Sam Nova way. If you order from my website, I will give you an instant $5 rebate. So that's something I'm more than happy to do. But certainly have that consultation, and I usually craft a plan. We try to help somebody in some way, even if people just connect with me on LinkedIn. I have close to 26. I'm 100 shy from 26,000
Nice.
first connections on LinkedIn. And just remember, and my closing thought is that everybody that comes has a different challenge. I've had moms call me up and say, hey, my husband just walked out on me after 9 years with a note on the table. I found another woman. And they say, Ed, I need to get back to work immediately.
Sure.
That's one scenario, right? You have an executive with one firm for 19 years. Ed, I think I could do more. Help me get there. I could have a mom or dad call and say, our son or daughter just graduated from college a year ago. They're still downstairs in the cellar and they're not working. Help me.
Yeah.
Right? I have people who call, and this is probably the ones that I love the most. And I'm working for a maniac. I'm working for a company that treats me horribly. I'm working for somebody who puts me down. That the F word flies around all day long in this building. And you know what? They promised me a raise, and it's been 5 years.
Yeah.
There's always a way out. Work with a coach, whether it's me, whether it's other coaches, work with a coach. A lot of people don't know that coaches are there to help people get out of those situations. And if you're thinking about a pivot, I love pivots. So I will close on everybody's at a different place. No one's at the same place. And we have to meet people where they're at to help them get to that better place. And I want to thank you for having me, Bill.
Oh, you're welcome. I love your comments, perspective, insights, etc. And thank you again for taking the time this morning. Any other questions in the chat for Ed before we sign off until the top of the hour? Going once. It's my best broadcaster voice there, so I guess not. So Ed, I will, obviously, if you'd like to come in, at any other point during the day, more than welcome to. Again, appreciate all of your thoughts, perspective, insights, and perspective, and we'll go from there. Thanks again.
Okay, thanks again, Bill. Thanks, everybody.